get started. So welcome to, this is our final session in our AMP Bootcamp series. Yeah, Doug, there's a little pouty face. Yeah, thanks for it. This is really, we've really appreciated having you show up for these sessions. You know, really great discussions. And so we're just thrilled to have Stephanie Gillis-Paulgaard join us. She's been, you know, has her own company, Take Roots Consulting. She's been working with us on the project to develop social media strategy and to, you know, promote AMP. The piece that we're also wanting to build in is that all of the kind of assets that we've developed, you know, for our AMP social media, that those would be available as well to folks. But Stephanie's gonna share her broad knowledge with us about, you know, how to use social media to promote your program. And I'll just say, particularly for you who's, you know, joining from Fort McMurray, to make the next round of recruiting easier. So I'll leave it for you, Stephanie, and just call out if you need any support at any time.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much. And welcome. Happy Friday. Happy Friday. So just by way of background, I also like to keep this rather informal in a conversation. There is a slide deck that we'll go through. If it is comfortable for you, I usually encourage participants, if they have a question, throw it in the chat. We may not get to it until the end, but then at least that way it's off your mind, or write it down and hold it, because often if we don't raise our hand or get it out, we're focused on not losing the question, and you may end up missing something that you could then take away from and work with afterwards. So I feel free to do that. I'm not overly technical on here, but I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the screen so we can get right into it. Let me know, is everybody able to see that okay?
Yeah, that's great, Stephanie.
Okay, and then let's just practice. Oh, no, it's going to do the other, which is always the challenge with me. Let's try again, just to make sure that it's up. There we go. Okay. So I wanted to, again, bring it back to the basics. I really want to build some skills in here too on the promotional side. But if at any time, because I haven't been able to sit and talk with each of you, your knowledge may be ahead of where we're talking, by all means, I don't wish to spend too much time repeating things that you would already know. So do let me know if you'd like me to speed up or slow down. I get extremely excited about this topic. I'm kind of passionate on this. Annette is smiling because she knows how much I love it. But I really want to just talk about why we would even use social media as part of our integrated strategy. Clearly now more than ever in the last year, we know so many people are online, and this is how they're connecting to us. So without, you know, we have small budgets and we have a limited resources, right? Whether that is the time or the human. So when we think about how are we going to grow the audience organically, don't even think about paid advertising. Social is the way to do it. We can then harness that momentum. A lot of you, I'm sure, whether it's launching a new group on Monday, as you mentioned, or coming up to think about events that are just coming out of the global talent conference, things of that nature. We think about how we can use that to build and grow our audience. Engaging and connecting, you know, whether it be, I'm on TikTok, I don't know who else is on there, but I use it to have a little bit of fun and grow my community. We'll talk about LinkedIn and Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. There may be some questions that you have on specific platforms, so by all means, keep that in mind for the Q&A piece. And of course, building the community within the program and the mentorship community as a whole. So we talk a lot about the fact that, yes, the AMP program, the Alberta Mentorship Program, has designed or developed some resources, but you yourselves are resources to each other. So think about always connecting with others that are involved in the community. And demonstrate, of course, the quality of the program. Well, we're talking about celebrating those wins. The fact that you've had, and I know it was when we hit the record button, but sharing something like you have 7 matches. what a wonderful display of the quality of the programs that you're putting together. So think about that when you're talking about why would we even use social. So I'm covering off on this slide, as you can see, who are we trying to reach and what are we trying, hope for when we're sharing and picking those platforms. Clearly, LinkedIn is a platform that I think everybody on this call today is on. It's active. It is popular with the professionals. It's a way to identify potential mentors or mentees that would be interested in your programs moving forward. Twitter, again, it's a fast-paced, it's really good and timely for news. So there's people that will solely go to Twitter and block out their 15 minutes in the morning or the afternoon to get clips of news and then decide whether or not that's relevant to share or engage in. So it might be, AMP, we've established a Twitter and a LinkedIn account, okay, and YouTube for that matter. Facebook, although it references a US stat, it's very similar in Canada, that about 70% of people are still using Facebook, and organizations alike. So it has both the personal and the professional component. AMP does not have right now an active Facebook page. And of course, when we were deciding on our own strategy of where we needed to be, we thought about it and it might come down the road, but we wanted to, with limited resources, think about what are the platforms where we could engage and grow our community, like-minded people. And it seemed to be that LinkedIn and Twitter were the two that we went with. And we're trying to really hone those communities. So I would invite you to think the same when you're developing your own strategy, or even trying to evolve from where you are now. Instagram, some of us may be on it personally, organizations do use it. And as it says here, it's very visual, it's known for pretty pictures. So not to say that a mentorship program couldn't use Instagram, but it may not be one of your primary platforms. YouTube clearly is a video content platform. Annette, we have all of our videos up there to date. I can't remember how many, but there's several on there. Pinterest is great for repurposing content. Now, we don't use it actively for AMP. I myself use it on a business side. So there are some valuable tips and tricks there, but it may not be one of your focuses. I alluded to TikTok. It is very much, when you look at your demographics, slightly more popular with women. While it says majority of users are under the age of 34, I am not under the age of 34, and I'm very active on TikTok. And it seems that actually the older demographic, and by older, 40 plus, 45 plus, are really starting to take hold of that platform. And Snapchat, the fun filter platform, is definitely a little bit on the younger side for the demographic. Oh, and here we go again. Why? There we go. Okay. So when we talk about the profiles and everything that you're going to create, some tips and tricks to think about, and it may be, if you haven't really thought about it, you've been active on social media for quite some time, and now you want to take a look or do what we call an audit to see if you're just checking off these boxes. So making sure that you have consistent handles, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, on Facebook, so that it's brand recognition, people can easily find you. Keep your handles where you can, short and sweet, and using those acronyms if you're able to. So the example that you see up on the screen, the AV mentorship, again, LinkedIn, Twitter, we would want to do it consistently across all of those. Where you can use a profile picture, if you want to do the branding piece, if you have a nice logo, great to do. And of course, you're all about connecting people. So that's when you try to make that consistency in your brand. And yeah, this was a little tip, because often people will create their bio, their picture, and then it doesn't fit right in a circle. So just remember how visually it's going to be laid out on the screen for people to see. How are we doing for pace? Is this feeling okay for everyone? Yes, thank you. All right, so this is kind of a critical piece when we talk about engagement and how we're going to grow our community. We want to take the time to reply to comments. Okay, so whether it doesn't matter what platform it's on, if you can set aside time daily, or you set your notifications so they're not going crazy on your phone, but you make sure that you're touching point, you're recognizing and engaging in the comments. It actually helps with your algorithms as well, regardless again of what platform you're on. You can check mentions on Twitter, you can actually click on it, you can see your analytics. Acknowledging new followers, it's just kind of that warm feel of welcoming somebody into your community. The fact that they've taken the time to follow you, you don't necessarily, it's not a follow for follow. You may have heard that term before. If they're aligned, if they're showing interest in the topic, in the content that you're putting out, and yes, you want to bring them into the community, of course you would like to follow them back. But I again encourage you to look at the bios of people and make sure that, again, it's just a quick thing. You'll look at AMP, we do it, where we say, thank you so much for joining the community. You might want to put emojis or GIFs, things like that. It's just a nice welcome. And again, it helps with the algorithm, because what will happen is if Stephanie started following AMP, and there was engagement, the people that follow me will see that. And then they'll go, oh, who is AMP? Let me check that out. And just by natural organic, you'll start to have more eyes on the content that you're pushing out. Using relevant hashtags, always key, whether it is hashtag Mentorship Matters, hashtag AMP, special days, holidays, whatever your content is, please make sure that you're trying to include some hashtags where appropriate. We're going to talk a little bit more about the repurposing existing content in a couple of slides, so I'm going to leave that for right now. When I talk about monitoring hashtags, perhaps most of you have experience in the past of actually clicking on a hashtag and seeing where it is, if it's trending, if it's relatable to you. So just again, getting comfortable with what the community is using, and then very specific hashtags to you for your brand, for your organization. People have been saying for the last couple of months, and I think you'll hear it again throughout the course of the year, that 2021 is the year of video. So where you have video content, making sure that you're sprinkling that across your platforms, considering, again, Instagram is a square format versus LinkedIn and Twitter. They require different formats, but where you can share and actually see people engaging with each other, the power of the spoken word brings engagement on a different level. So this is a question, everyone. I don't know if you've come across it, or you sit and you kind of try to think through, well, when? Okay, so I know what platforms I'm on, but when exactly am I supposed to post? I get asked it a lot by different groups that I have the privilege to serve. And at the end of the day, your analytics, this is very general information, I wish to point that out, but if you're comfortable in looking at your analytics that will appear in Twitter or in LinkedIn or on Instagram, or if you use a scheduling platform, you can run reports, you'll start to see when your community is actually active. And that would typically trigger you to post around those times or on those specific days. Generally speaking, for LinkedIn, which of course is a popular platform for this group, there are good days and there are not the best days to post. So I would encourage you to think about LinkedIn being, again, that Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The best day is Wednesday and Thursday. And the worst day is Sunday. So when you're thinking about when am I going to push out my content, you can look at your analytics specifically if you have the ability to do so, and get comfortable with that, even if it's just a baseline because you've never done it before. And then you start to play with your content, or sprinkle your content on those popular days where there's a lot of activity on this particular platform. And then you start to evaluate your engagement levels. And engagement, just by way of definition, that could be a like, a share, a retweet, a comment. That's what engagement refers to in this case. Still good for pace? I feel like I'm starting to get extra excited. Okay, good. Okay, so again, I wanted to use the example of Twitter because AMP is active on this platform. Best times, Wednesday and Friday at 9 a.m. Best days, yes, of course, Wednesday and Friday. Worst day is Saturday for Twitter. So we also have to think about, actively during the typical work week, even though we know typical work day looks different right now. Monday to Fridays are always where, if you were limited to resources, meaning you only have so much time to even develop content, try to put it on the typical work day within the work hours. But then if you're really trying to hone in, test and see what's going to work around these best day, best time scenarios. And as I said before, I would highly encourage you, if you have the ability, to look at your analytics for whatever platforms you're currently on and really see where your specific followers are active, meaning the day and the time, and start playing with your content placement. Okay, so this is a big one. Some people feel overwhelmed when it comes to social media, and they sometimes come to me and they say they're stuck. They just don't know what types of content will work for their audience, or they feel like they've tried just about everything and they're just stuck on new content ideas. So I wanted to put this slide together just to give you again, oh, I never thought about that. Behind the scenes is a great way to draw engagement for your community. And behind the scenes can be literally, I'll give you an example for myself. It was me taking a picture of my setup for this morning, and that is like a behind the scenes, and then I would give some commentary as to what I'm doing. Time-lapse videos. Again, I'm not overly techie, but my iPhone is my biggest tool, right? I can actually go onto my video, pick a time lapse, and then I can run through, walk around for a couple of minutes. It speeds it right up to, I get this beautiful 15-second clip, and it's kind of fun to watch, and it's really engaging. And then I can put a caption to it, a day in the life of, right? Or this is what PR looks like. Or here, we're getting ready for our, upcoming mentorship conference, and we're putting goodie bags together, or things of that nature. You can turn anything into a piece of content, just getting a little bit more creative of what just is standard of a post, right? A typical post. Important dates, clearly we like to celebrate holidays, we engage them. Share testimonials from the mentee and the mentor side of things, from the employee side of things. Really show people the quality of the programs that you're putting together, or the excitement about starting something new. You can always poll your followers, your community. Ask them what type of content that they would like to see you push out, whether that's writing a LinkedIn article, or you're thinking about starting something a little different on an event, or what day of the week works best for you. So again, you're involving them in the conversation. Countdowns to a launch day for a new grouping that's happening. Educational content will always win, and it will secure you and build your credibility, right, as a subject matter expert. So you always want to be including that. There might be an opportunity for you with a partner or a mentor or a mentee that they want to do a social media takeover because they want to tell their story, and you're going to dedicate a certain time frame to a campaign like that. Did you know DYK putting out stats? Again, it checks the box of educational, but it engages people differently. Infographics and things of that nature. And motivational or inspirational quotes. I'm a big fan of those, and they always tend to drive a lot of engagement. So I said earlier, we were going to talk a little bit about repurposing existing content. This is another way to make sure that you're not falling short, if you will, or drying up that content idea generation. You already have content that you've created. If you have a website, if you've done videos, if you have testimonials, if you've done an annual report or a quarterly report or a newsletter, or you write a blog. And so this is the whole idea of you can take one piece and share it differently across the different platforms and engage people in a different way by simply taking, again, that one piece of content, sharing it on a different platform, and maybe changing it up, whether it's the visual to the video and things of that nature. I want to walk you through an exercise on a blog post as the sample, right? So that is your first piece. If you have a blog post or a LinkedIn article, it could actually become a podcast episode if you have the ability to do that. It could become an infographic. It can become a how-to guide to walk people through. It can be an article that you then push out via MailChimp or whatever platform, or just simply email to a group of people that have signed up to receive regular communication. Or it becomes a slide deck with key messages that are taken out and then added visuals too. And then you can move it around on the platforms, right? So just a blog post directing your audience to your website is great, but then if you change it into these other pieces and you're still involving them, right, with a call to action to say, here, now sign, if you like this blog post, sign up for our newsletter, become a member, so that you know that you're going to find out about, our upcoming events. There's many ways to take pieces of content and repurpose them. And then all of a sudden you feel like, oh, wow, when I'm scheduling out or I'm looking at what content I can create, all of a sudden my calendar doesn't look so blank. You can start dropping these things in and really being strategic in that thought process. So yes, again, people still can get stuck. And I want you to try to think about answering questions even before the community comes forward and asking them. And if you're stuck, what's not on this screen, but it will be on subsequent materials, or if you follow me, I actually talk about, maybe some of you have heard it before, a question generator. So there's lots of question generators out there. If it's a verb now, if you Google it, and you actually type in question generator, there's lots of them up there. They're completely free. And you can type in mentorship. Simple as that. And hundreds of questions will then be displayed, because it gathers, it's AI essentially, and it gathers these questions that are frequently asked on that topic. And now you've got a list of, it's basically an endless list of questions that you can answer, and then you can decide how you would like to answer those. If those are 15-second videos, if it's a blog post, if it's an infographic, all of those content ideas that we talked about a couple of slides ago, it can now, you just use that approach, but now you've got this question generator. And you can, do it over and over and over again, just again, put in another word or another phrase, and it will generate lists of questions that you can then ask or answer, pardon me. Images, really, really important. We just want to make sure that when you're using them, there's a little tip in there. I referenced already, my phone is with me all the time. I do a lot of my work on my phone, and so I'm constantly snapping photos, just making sure, again, we have this high resolution image that we're putting out on social, because we are obviously trying to come across professional and protecting our brand. I've given you examples of free resources on the side here that I actually use myself for other imagery sources. And if you're using from other parties or from events, again, you know that consent is really important to make sure that you have in place. I think I've probably covered most of this. Oh yes, at the end, there's an important note that I want to draw your attention to. Crediting, so again, if we're using one, we've received the permission, certainly credit them, but where you can tag, and again, for those of you that may not, I think you all know the term tagging, but again, being able to literally tag another account with the @ symbol and their handle, that will again trigger a notification to that individual. First of all, it's the right thing to do ethically, to let them know that you're using and sourcing their work, but also it will now start the conversation with that individual or that organization, because they will want to thank you for recognizing them, and chances are they will reshare it with a comment of their own. So again, it's that organic reach that you will see over time. So popular free tools for video, I've put those again on the side for you. And again, video can work across so many platforms, whether it's Instagram stories, Instagram reels, Twitter fleets, Facebook, LinkedIn stories, general LinkedIn posts, TikTok. You could again repurpose video using YouTube and everything else. I can't recall how we're putting them on our website. I don't know, Annette, if you can jump in or not and answer that question, or maybe you want to hold it till the end. But people sometimes use Vimeo and things of that nature to actually put it on their website. If you're not familiar with that, we can certainly answer those questions at the end.
We use YouTube, and we use it embeds into the website via YouTube.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Annette. And listen, at the end of the day, it's all about trying to keep this easy and simple and organized, right? So we're trying to build organization out of sometimes chaos. So try not to get overwhelmed. If you haven't thought about it already, I would highly encourage you to consider a content calendar. So a scheduling platform. There are free versions out there to get you started. Canva has a free version of Canva from the graphical perspective, but it also back in September started offering a scheduling platform within. And as nonprofits, there's special rates that are available that you would just need to fill out when you go through that exercise. There's Hootsuite, Sprout Social, all of them are available to you, but I encourage you to just look and see which one would serve you best. That way, when you're thinking about the type of content that you have and you're looking at a calendar, you know, a week's worth of content could be done in about an hour or so once you start utilizing the tools and getting that strategy in place. So now if you're putting upfront work of an hour and a half or 2 hours in, and then you're saving yourself time and you start to see a nice flow of communication that is going out, and then the only responsibility is once you have it scheduled is to go back and remember what I was talking about closer to the beginning of our talk was the notion of engaging in those comments, checking your mentions and things of that nature. And again, in bold at the bottom, if we ever find ourselves in another event of a tragedy or crisis, if you do have scheduled posts, I advise you to go back and cancel those. So again, just being mindful of what you have and what's coming up, that should go into your best practices. So again, I've talked about Hootsuite, Canva, and a couple of little notes there. If you're ever wondering about important dates, you can go to websites like Days of the Year, National Today, and that can again be quick hits of information. You can put up, you know, pretty pictures next to it, call out if you don't have the time or the ability to use Canva at the moment to build other graphics. As long as you're putting it there, you can source where you've received the information. And again, inspirational quotes and Pinterest is great for that, right? Even inspiration if you need any more. So with that, I want to, I guess, stop sharing the screen, and we want to go ahead and open the floor to questions, comments. I'm all yours. I did not talk about, I know that there's some stuff happening in the chat right now. I want to let you know if you were frantically trying to make notes, a reminder that this will be available, but also following this session, we were able to create a content tip sheet for you. It's a one-pager, so it covers off a lot of what we've talked about just in the slide deck, and that will be sent out to you following the session as well. Thank you, Annette. I see it in the chats there. Wonderful. So I guess I would like to start and say, it was that overwhelming for people? Are people feeling a little bit less fearful? I say, feel the fear and do it anyway. It's kind of one of my favorite lines. You just need to jump in sometimes, even if we don't know all the answers, to get started and start the process of, hey, we're going to use social. We have lots of things to talk about. We can inspire, we can educate, we have events, we have testimonials, and then it's just about pragmatically thinking, where is it going to go and on what platforms are we going to engage our community? There's some nodding.
So I'm curious, like, is this something, you know, that happens at the Northern YMCA that somebody else does for your organization? Or is there an expectation at a program level that there's some social media activity?
Thank you, Stefania, first of all. I have a comment, actually, not a question, according to what Cheryl is asking. At YMCA, we have a marketing department who is responsible of social media. So as employment link, actually, we don't have this liberty to handle social media and to promote our program through different platforms using social media. Maybe this, I believe it's very important way to promote the program, but unfortunately, we're not able personally to handle the social media. So because we have to follow the hierarchy in the organization, so we cannot go forward and mention anything on, or post anything on any platform on social media unless we have the approval of the marketing department, and we have to follow this hierarchy. So it's a little bit challenging for our program to promote the mentorship program through social media.
Is there an opportunity? Sorry, yes. I was just curious if maybe there might be an opportunity, if we go back to what we were saying before, if we had a calendar and if we could do even 2 weeks at a time, and we blocked out, you know, let's say 3 days out of the 5 work days, this notion of, you know, an educational post or an inspirational post or something very specific to your program. And if you were able to do that in advance and push it through to get the approvals so that there's a nice, you know, practice of every couple of weeks it's going through, so you have continuous movement forward on the content creation side of things. Would that be something that might work for you?
We start actually work like this, but just to post the flyer for the program, it took with us like 4 to 5 weeks to get the approval to post the flyer. So we are trying to use different tools to promote our programs by sending emails in the community for the organization to reach out to our clients. We hope that we can use, like, to get advantage of the social media and to be easier for us. But I think Adeline is working on this. Maybe Adeline, you can comment with the marketing department.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yes, the thing is, like Raina just explained, to have any approval for the marketing department, it took us 4 to 6 weeks. So we sent everything out, even just the little flyer took time. So everything need to go step by step, need to be approved. So everything is sent, but now we are just waiting. So every time we need to send and we are waiting the reply before we go forward. We need to sit down and have a meeting with this for the marketing, discuss about why before they approve anything. So now we are still working, everything is sent to the marketing. So we are waiting them to apply. Until now they are going based off what they receive for different team of YMCA. So it took time. So, but hopefully we will have something earlier, or they will answer to us.
There's always a process, right?
Yeah, it's a really long process. Yeah.
And, you know, the thing that I can see, you know, because you're in what I would say probably a bigger organization than I think a lot of communities, you know, community organizations that might step into mentorship, you know, having really a higher conversation about, in a way, like to run mentorship effectively, having this kind of mentor audience could be a whole different audience than how the marketing, you know, without knowing details about the marketing strategy, because so many of your other programs are really geared to the clients that you're bringing in. And so that would be the focus, I would assume. And so definitely, I mean, helping them understand, you know, part of how this works is there's this other business community, and that may be thought of, you know, I know when we had our site visit, you know, hearing lots of stories about businesses that would support like a community event, like a charity barbecue, or that those connections are built, but a need to kind of look at this other way to engage that business community with this other, you know, partnership opportunity that may, you know, having worked in organizations a lot of my career, you know, that may be a longer conversation to help them understand what that's about, and why you would want social media presence relative to that. But I do think that if there's a way to help link it to like warming up the relationship for businesses that might be donor supporters of community events or in other sorts of ways of the organization, they might, like in some ways that community support channel might make more sense from a marketing perspective than the promotion of the program. But I sort of throw that out, you know, I know Doug and Bruce, you've had to balance these two audiences for a long time. So maybe you have a perspective on that.
Yeah, maybe I'll join in and know when we got involved with social media, and I'm by no means a social media expert. I actually, my hat's tipped to Bruce and his team. They do a great job, and some of the stuff I've seen on Twitter that they've done. And you've got, Bruce, you've got an excellent person doing some of that work. And I love retweeting stuff. It's about what I can do on Twitter. But one of the things that we did, at least, and I think this goes back to an earlier conversation, is being strategic about it. And I know you guys may not have the aperture or the ability like I would or Bruce would in our organizations, because we're at the top, so we are answering to the board. So the board would be interested and worried about some of the stuff that would go out, let's say, in terms of what we're sending out on any of those platforms. So that's their preoccupation. But one of the things that, and again, going back to our earlier conversations in past boot camps, is being strategic about the work that we do, being strategic about outreach. How do we do that in a strategic way? So we always go back to our mission. Our mission is to potentialize newcomers in their professions. So that is the touchstone, you know, and when I have to fight for that in terms of, let's say, a social media strategy or communication strategy, I take my board or anybody who might be a little cautious or might be getting in the way of some things. I just remind them, this is our mission, folks. This is what we do. And in order to do this, we've identified some barriers. So if we're trying to potentialize newcomers in their positions, in their fields, there's, I need to get some things that I need mentors, I need mentees, we need to get that word out. And using social media is one of the strategies in doing that. Sometimes we do in-person communications or presentations. Sometimes we use the website. Sometimes there's a number of ways we do it. But I think what Stephanie has done for us today which I just love. I wish I would have had Stephanie back in the day when we first started, because you know, for me, it was just kind of, social media was this nebulous sort of thing, and ethereal. Like, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I know, you know, basic stuff. But the way Stephanie brought it down and distilled it for us today is just really, like, there's still some stuff I would have to kind of figure out on my own, and the whole scheduling piece and working it into my day-to-day life. But that's afterwards, once I've got the approval from the board and I have a solid strategy. And in the case of Fort McMurray, having some kind of strategy, talking to your team and saying, in order for us to be the mentorship program in Fort McMurray, we need to have this social media strategy. Here are some of the key messages that we've identified. Here are some of the, you know, the approaches and processes we're taking. Here are the key target audiences that we're looking at. And then have that discussion with the people that, I'm not saying getting in the way of what you're doing, but they, you know, it seems to be a longer process than it should be. But they're also there for a reason. They need to protect the branding of the organization. They've got a job to do as well. So you guys would have to maybe look at starting a conversation that might begin with a strategy that ties into the goal of the program or the mission of the program.
Can I add something? So Stephanie, thank you so much for this presentation. Oh my God, like social media, this is the key. This is the tool we need if we want to promote our program, especially when it's new, completely in our, but we have to understand the environment we are living in and then try to use those media, because this is the way we can communicate with people. So we can just sit down, I mean, and then maybe if we plan, we have a program, then we can present it. I think it's a way to push the people, say, hey, maybe this, let's give a chance for that. But I remember that this social media, using social media, it was, we mentioned it before when we are having meeting, we are trying to put the program together and so on. But hopefully that it will be something like we can use, because this is the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely another tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You're most welcome.
For now, actually, we rely the most on word of mouth to promote the program in this small community, to try to let all the other organizations in the community to know about the program, just to send emails, to make phone calls. This is our way to promote the program for now.
And you know what, Rana, that's okay. Even in the beginning, like that's how we did it. We did most of our work word of mouth. Like we were like cavemen, you know, like we were like, you know, we were so far back in how we did things, and it just lots of extra work. And really, like you said, I think once you've proven, you can still do the work that you need to do, handcrafting these relationships and, you know, using old systems. But you know, there can be a point where you can just sort of go to the powers that be, or the people that you want to work with, and just say, we have done the most we can given the tools we have, but we can be better. And we would like to start the dialogue on a social media or communication strategy. We think this is good for the organization. Will be great for the program, and will be more efficient, better use of our time, and we'll get better, you know, we can hit more clients. And that's probably what the communications people that you're going to be working with, or management, are going to be looking at. If you can show to them that by using this kind of tool, and without endangering the organization, because that's going to be their worst fear, I'm sure. Because and Stephanie, one of the questions I had for you too is like, and one of the fears I have is once you put yourself out there, like what happens when you get people going, oh my God, immigrants are taking over, and and you're getting these kinds of, you know, like, oh, like how do you, and when you say you've got to respond to these, how do you handle those kinds of situations? And so I guess before you answer that question, as part of your communication strategy will be some of the risks you'll have to answer. What is the risk? The risk if you don't do it, and the risk if you do. And how do we handle, let's say, a bad, comment? Like, what do we do with that? And so I'm sure the people you're going to deal with when you're putting your strategy together, that's what they're worried about. Is like, what happens if we get a whole bunch of people saying, oh my God, immigrants are taking over, blah, blah, blah. And you've got to be able to handle that. And so, and the people you want to negotiate the agreement with, they want to know that you can handle it, or maybe there's a process that you have to identify and say, when we have a bad comment, it goes straight to communications, or they handle that, or they, I don't know. But I think that's part of the discussion. What are going to be the process if you use those tools? Sorry, Stephanie, I didn't mean to.
No, you're good. And it is an absolute real concern for many, right, on both sides. So what I would suggest as part of that comm strategy, no different, Doug, you already talked about, key messages and key audience groups. So key messages are, yes, this is what we generally put out, but we also have standard messaging that's going to fit in the, 122 characters or whatever our number is on Twitter these days. When we see a comment like that, we have to assume it's coming. It's not, if, it's when. So you have to have those things ready to go. And I would encourage people when they're thinking about the strategy, it is to respond timely. We do try to get people off of the public facing and invite them to have a further conversation to help again on that educational side offline. And to, you can follow up with DMs, you can tell them to reach out to you that way to continue the conversation, but you always have a standard line. And but again, it protects, so it's risk management and brand reputation. And the same of, if you have multiple hands that are touching your social media platforms, and Jane goes away on vacation, but Sue didn't know that was the way I was supposed to respond, then it can go sideways. And so it does go back to systems and process to be able to understand, no, when this type of thing happens, this is what everybody on the team, this is the response that you give. And these are the next steps that you do. You invite them to do this, you invite a sit down, you invite a follow-up call and such.
We have an annual, and actually we're getting a little bit lazy about it, but we have an annual review of our communications document. So once we established a template of what that might look like, and I was working with a couple of board members and even some outside people who do communications. And so this small little committee, and we would work on establishing the document and update it every year. So one of the things I would say, if you do choose to do a strategic sort of document, you want to go through that year after year, because some of those things will change. You don't want to have, like, those key messages may change in the next year. So you want to kind of, or maybe they don't, but you want to have that process of reviewing it so that it's current, and that the people that will be complicit or part of the process, not just you guys who are implementing a program, but everybody around, so that they understand what it is you guys are doing, and that you have considered it in your mind, all of these things, and you review it on a regular basis. It doesn't, like Stephanie says, not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen. So if you have a document, there's still stuff that'll be beyond your control. It's just, sorry, but that's just the way it is. Once you put yourself out there in social media, you are exposing yourself. So if you have a good plan, you've talked about risks, that's as best as you can do. And then just do it, because the benefits will be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
It's worth the process.
Agreed. Bruce, did you have something you wanted to add? Yeah, I thought you had something to add, Bruce.
Oh, yeah, thanks. So I've got a couple of quick notes. Great conversation, and thank you, Stephanie. This has been amazing. A couple of quick comments. Last spring, we felt that it was important to get a note out to our community in response to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. we wanted to make sure it was done in, you know, as we say in the Indigenous community, in a good way. And so, like Doug says, we've got a basically a comms plan that nobody sends out unless it's me or our media person. You know, the chair doesn't have the right to tweet. None of my staff members do. And I'm just sometimes the facilitator, so I'm not the drafter all the time. I'm just the facilitator. And so this was such an important message we wanted to send out there that we actually struck sort of a subcommittee amongst the board, amongst staff, and my staff and my board are almost all from the Black community or from communities of color. But we didn't take that as the standard bearer of, well, we know what to do intuitively. And so I took the first crack at drafting a statement, and I was walking a very fine line, and a lot of the work that I do is in BIPOC communities for the last couple of decades. And so I thought I was finding the right voice, and the subcommittee ramped it up. So here I was being really tentative. And I remember one of the key phrases that I included in was want to celebrate the Black community in Calgary, and two of my subcommittee members, both of whom are Black, said, Bruce, you be more accurate. What is your relationship with the Black community in Calgary? And so they said, we would recommend you use the word my brothers and sisters in the Black community. Changed the message completely. It radically changed it. It struck at the heart. And when we put it out, it was one of those messages that when you sat back and you looked at it and you said, you know what, if there's criticism, bring it on. Bring it on, because the entire team, the entire board, and other key members of our group out in the community said, this is what we think you need to put out. It took about 2 weeks. There was no knee-jerk reaction. There was not, and I wanted to, because I have friends, people that I've worked with and people that I've known all my life who have been, and I've got Black family members, and there was one fellow in particular, a Calgarian that I'd mentored for a long time, and he was in the middle of this in Minnesota, a guy named Matt Dumba, and Matt eventually helped create the Hockey Diversity Alliance, and I was supporting Matt and his family and that sort of stuff, but it was just one of these things that I resisted the knee-jerk reaction. I went back to the comms plan, then I went to my chair, and then we said, okay, let's do this systematically. Like Doug said, we were lucky because it's my call at the end of the day as executive director. If I'm going to get praised by a tweet, I should be able to get fired by a tweet as well. And so I took that responsibility on, but I didn't feel comfortable. And what was amazing was that I was actually, when it went out, it was one of those things that everybody looked at it and they said, listen, if the racists of Calgary want at it, we're ready to fight. And nothing happened. But it was it just told me that sometimes just stop. You don't need to send that tweet out on a Friday night. Think about it. I often do tweets in draft, and I can tuck them in my draft. I just hopefully I'm not having a Pink Whitney and I hit send or I hit tweet. And so I sort of developed that. So that to me was super powerful because we had the right voice that struck the right tone. Yes. And it was a collective voice. It wasn't Brucey's voice. It was this collective voice that said, no, Bruce, understand the role your organization plays and understand, the way people see you and use that appropriately. They didn't want me jumping up on a table and pounding the tabletop, but they said, okay, there's a place to go to and we're going to help you to get there. And so that was probably the most, it was the most important tweet we sent out in 11 years. The other story, which was sort of a funnier one, but it sort of is a power of social media. So in my Indigenous community here, I'm involved in a mentoring program. And we just received, completely my volunteer world, we just received $250,000 from Ryan Reynolds and Blake Lively. And so we took a month to prep the program, and we were teasing our community. And then when Ryan sent it out, and we sent it out on Monday morning, it exploded. Ryan Reynolds, like 1.7 billion followers, right? But there was a little bit of a fear where he said, my God, we don't even know who follows Ryan Reynolds. Like who, because we're connecting to somebody, we realized the upside, but we also talked about the downside of being connected to anybody that big, because what's the negative that could happen? And because he was the donor, and we worked with him on the exact messaging, but it was one of these scary things that you put it out into the ether, as Doug says, and you don't know, all the negativity. What if the very next day something came out about Ryan Reynolds and something very negative? Well, we thought we were connecting with the happy side of Ryan Reynolds. Even my 28-year-old daughter sent me a text on Monday morning when it came out, and she said, Ryan Reynolds, WTF, exclamation mark. You know Ryan Reynolds? I said, I don't. He knows the organization. But my fingers are crossed that nothing negative comes out, because that would undo everything that we've done, right? So Stephanie, how do you deal with the negativity? And as Doug said, do you just find that happy balance?
Yeah, I mean, Doug put it quite well. I mean, at the end of the day, we have to assume that there is risk. When we put ourselves out there, we are exposing ourselves and our organizations. We're now vulnerable, right? To everyone and anyone who has an opinion. And we all know everyone has an opinion these days. And so the best you can do is prepare on that crisis management side, what ifs. Right? So you always have so I work with organizations, yes, to do crisis response manuals. What if this happens, because this was identified as a risk? These are the things, whether those are draft news releases, draft tweets, draft everything. I mean, you fill in the specifics when you know what the specifics are based on the scenario that you've identified. And that at the end of the day is the best that you can do. And it really is.
If I could. Oh, if I can just add one thing, I, played a role with an online conference that ended up having 500,000 participants in it last year. And my job was to wade into the negative social media and deal with it. We started to ramp up the week that the George Floyd situation happened. It was a hot space, what I can say that. And the little piece that I think is really helpful, I agree with everything Stephanie said, but I focused on one purpose was, as people called us out, I would call them in to a conversation. Didn't always work. It took many forms, and I did it thousands of times in the lead up to the conference, because I would say 95% of people were thrilled, satisfied, had a good experience, but 5% of 500,000 is still a lot of people, right? Yeah. And so to really understand your why, what you're doing, where your stance is, and then to be able to listen to people and receive them in that conversation, sometimes just that was enough to people, even to the point of, I don't agree with you, or I don't agree with you fully, but I see you're a real person with a real group of people. And of course, there were some that really went the other way. And this, as Stephanie said, people have their opinions. It may not change anything, but it's part of your integrity entering in to say, this is what we're standing up for. This is what we believe in. And there's only so far that you're willing to go in the ground that you have. But I say that from, like, it literally was the hottest work I've done in the diversity inclusion space. And sometimes, I left a day with bruises, it felt like, because it was rough. I can appreciate that. As much as I understand the culture of Fort McMurray, I don't think it would get to that kind of degree for you, but there are people who have radically different ideas about what Canada should look like, about what a community should look like. And so it's good to have eyes open, and it helps understand, you know, the reluctance or maybe the fear that your marketing department might have about that. I did want to just mention, you know, probably by the end of your pilot, one of the things we'll have is video that showcases experience from some mentors, mentees, and from your team. And we're, you know, planning to do a kind of spotlight article on the experience of your organization and community and doing it. Those might be really warm assets to bring into the discussion with your marketing department. You know, realistically, there has to be a decision. Will you continue to offer mentorship, and how's that going to run? Because this project supports the pilot, but it's not an ongoing support. But definitely, I mean, you'll be really good internal advocates for what you did achieve, what the kind of benefits were, and to show some way about here's some things that could feed into how this goes forward that are absolutely, like, you want to see that voice at the internal decision-making table about what's possible and what can go forward. And we can definitely, you know, help you, support you in that.
Yeah, I just want to add, you guys sitting around the table in Fort McMurray are future leaders. And so one of the biggest takeaways for you today is, you know, being prepared, having this, what we're talking about a little bit is having a good plan, but also taking into consideration risk analysis. And anything that you do, keep in mind always, there's got to be some kind of, and this is something I've learned from my board because they're all business people, risk. And now what's the risks? And so it's kind of like even with the pandemic, what was the risk plan? Everybody had to put together a risk plan. Well, you know, out of the blue, for how many years we didn't have a risk plan? You know, it was just like, no, who believed that there was going to be a pandemic? You know, and there's been documents about, you know, for organizations, what happens if there's a global pandemic? It almost sounds like the zombie apocalypse, right? And it's like, that's never going to happen. And then all of a sudden it happens, and all of a sudden we're in a big hurry to put together a plan. What happens if I get sick, and where does this go? Who's got the bank accounts? Who's got so that kind of thing, even in the work we're doing with mentorship, having an idea, an understanding of what the risks and what are the risks of having a social media campaign, we need to hit that head on, like Bruce said, and, you know, and being brave about it. And also being Canadian about it, you can actually maybe adopt more passive aggressive approach to things, like what we always do, you know, be good listeners and not hit people aggressively with a response to something they might say on social media. It was like, oh, that's a really interesting perspective you have, you know, like that's kind of typical Canadian, you know, passive aggressive, you know, like how we respond to things. And if you'd like to discuss that further, I can, if you have a protocol or a process, I'll send you on to my manager or to somebody else, because I am not prepared to answer that question. And you seem very emotional about it right now. And, but you know, so instead of being afraid about doing these things, let's arm ourselves with the tools that we need to do this. And like Bruce said, I mean, like the way he handled that with his board and his, you know, and the people around him, it was about discussing this as a strategy. And being brave, like bring it on, like, and the same for you guys in Fort McMurray, bring it on, because you know what, that kind of attention makes you stronger. And, you know, and here, let's put it another way. We're talking about the negative. Let's talk about the positive, because you're going to get a lot of comments coming at you going, this is an amazing initiative. Wow, I didn't know that existed in Fort McMurray. So, I mean, we're talking about the negative. You guys will probably get more positive things coming out of a social media campaign than you would a negative, but at least you're ready for a negative if it comes up.
Yeah, I think the secret to, you know, whatever success that we've had has been driven by the team, the board, and our media person. And I think it comes back to one thing outside of the comms plan, is that we've had a consistent voice. So it's not like there's different people. There are different people involved in the conversation, but it sounds like it's one voice that's coming out of CRIEC. And we, early in the day, we staked it out. It was going to be more aspirational and inspirational than it was going to be problematic. It was going to aspire to the better angels in our world. It was going to be, we were going to be emotional when we had to be emotional. We were going to draw on Canada. And so I have no hesitation putting up a picture of the lighthouse down the street where I grew up on the Atlantic Ocean, or the river that I paddled on. I have no problem putting that up because people expect the CRIEC world to be a little bit different. It's a little bit funky, but we staked out that voice early. And as Doug and Stephanie said, a lot of planning went into that. And we thought, is this the right voice? You know, we're in Calgary. Who gives a rat's rear end about, you know, Northern New Brunswick? Well, we do. And we wanted other people to do, because then we wanted people to be passionate about Peru and passionate about Nigeria and passionate about India. And so what we tried to do was we tried to create a human side, sort of a human voice. Stephanie, how important is it for your social media to be human as opposed to be, it looks like a robot is responding and you're just pumping out the kinds of things?
Yeah, that doesn't really work, does it? Because you can't connect to that. Yeah. People do business with people, people engage with people, people are inspired by people, right? At the end of the day, I mean, when I think about my content pillars, I do a third, a third, a third. A third of my content is educational, a third is inspirational, and a third is about me as a person, because people need to be able to connect with me, just like you said about New Brunswick, you know, my business, my product, or my service. And that's the, you know, the sprinkle effect, if you will.
Yeah.
But we have to remember we're all human, and you actually do want to connect or evoke an emotion from somebody, you know, like, yes, there's calls to action, and calls to action can look very different depending on what you're trying to achieve.
One of the things I love is when people get you riled up and no, or not even riled up, when they ask me about our program, like, don't get me started, because I'm going to move into a passion place that I'm so passionate about the work that we do. And I don't even have to think about it, but just when the door opens and you ask me to start speaking about, I will defend it with passion, which I don't normally have to do a lot. But if you push me, I will defend this. I'll give you the business case. I will give you the human case. I will give you all of those coming from my heart. But also, you know, it just allow that to come. You are a defender of something. You're building society. You're building connections for people who have chosen Canada as a place to do business, to requite their careers here. They've chosen Canada. They want to live here. They want their kids to grow up here, and they want their kids' kids to grow up here. So that's where we're going to in our hearts. That's what we're defending. That's what we're doing for them. And so think about that. That I can defend that. And I think most Canadians can, even the hard-nosed Canadians, if they're, you know, kind of being resistant to it. Canada was built on immigration. We're all sons and daughters and grandsons and granddaughters of immigrants. So it's a story that I can go to with a lot of feeling.
Well, this has been fantastic. I see we're at the end of our time. Thank you so much, Stephanie, for coming and sharing your information. You know, we'd included the tip sheet in the chat, but I'll make sure that's sent out to everyone who registered. And just thank you so much for coming in and participating with this boot camp. It was one of our experiments about how to engage and support people like you that are at the front line of work to try and make mentorship come alive in your community. So we really appreciate your work with that. And we're looking at more things to come as we, you know, transition through the end of this project year and into next year. So thank you very much, and take care, and we'll stay in touch.